So, you know, what I'm saying is I think that there's issues with technology, and we aren't addressing them properly, and we're delaying the rollout of technology because we are so focused on the the money-making opportunities rather than the actual, how can we make this tech work properly? So I'm very concerned about this, especially, you know, looking at the way Tesla rolls out their self-driving tech and so on and so forth. And a lot of people are coming out and saying this should not be used. It's fairly dangerous the way they're implementing it. We'll see though. We'll see. Stock's still hovering around $1,000 a share. So the indexes are holding up okay. I mean, nothing exciting. Dow's up 34. These are obviously not very bouncy at all. But as we looked at yesterday, if I could find yesterday. La la la. I'm waiting for it to load. It's taking forever. Stop it. That. So basically, what we're watching right now, because there's no changes in the rest, is what side of 15.3 are we on the NASDAQ? And we're just under 15.3. That's the line we're watching. It's a pointer inflection. We have Russell 2088, so we're below over here still. We're at 15.3 on the dot, which is why that one's black. And meanwhile, the S&P 4584 is above, right? And the Dow is at 35 something, I think. Whoa. Now I lost the whole thing. The Dow's at 35,303. That's actually not that good. So 35,303 is not that far off, but it's still over. So clearly over the Dow, clearly over the S&P, on the line for the NASDAQ, and clearly under for the Russell. In fact, 2080 was the low, and we're at 2088. So, but on the whole, this has been our chart since December. Nothing has happened. We haven't gone anywhere. Nothing has happened. You know, we've gone to the top of the range, we've gone to the bottom of the range, but we haven't really broken out. We haven't gone all green, and we haven't gone all red. We've just been in this range for about a month at this point. So, and that has worked out fantastically for our portfolios. So that's fine, because the portfolios are generally, you know, we play to go up. You know, we're not like avoiding profit, obviously. So we play to go up, but we're not playing for crazy stuff. So it doesn't really benefit us if the market goes up 20% in a year. You know, we're playing for like a 5%, 10% increase in the market. Flat is fine too, though. That's the way we play these things. You know, so Apollo is at, is that Apollo? I wish I could remember things. I think it's Apollo. Yeah. Where was that? There. No. There. Nope. There. Who can keep track? Where did I just see that? There. Oh, okay. So Apollo. We played it. I mean, on July 21st, we played it to go from 50 to 65. And on July 21st, it was at, here we go, down here. So it was at 56. So, we weren't aiming for the star. We weren't shooting for the stars here. We're just saying it's going to go from 50. It was at 55 or 56. We said it would get to 65 at some point. It kind of shot up to 80 in between. But our trade was just basically, we're selling the 50 puts because we thought that was low enough. We bought the 50 calls and we sold the 65 calls. And on that spread, we spent, it's 15, 16, so about $8,000 bucks. So it's like $8,000 or $9,000, and it's a $30,000 spread. So we're going to make good money. Going to make $22,000. That's almost 300% if it gets to 65. But it just didn't seem risky. It seemed like it's like we felt very comfortable about this being in this range. And remember, we had to hold 54. 54. If we spent $8,000 bucks, 54 was the break even on the trade. And we were over 54 when we entered it. So, these are nice conservative spreads where we were already at the spot we made money. So a flat market, we make money. Assuming obviously Apollo doesn't go differently than the rest of the market. But in a flat market, we make money. In an up market, we make money. We only lose money in a down market, but frankly, not that much. Because we're hedged, we're using a hedge on ourselves. And that's what it's all about. It's the risk reward of the stocks. And so, the bulk of the positions we take are low risk, high reward. And obviously, if you're going to make 3 times your money, that's a high reward. The risk is also the risk of ownership. So my risk is being forced to own 1,000 shares of Apollo at a net of 58, frankly, would be the net, because if we put 8,000 into it, but we never actually do get wiped out of these things. But if we got wiped out, then we'd lose $8,000 here, and we'd have be assigned at 50, so it would be $58,000 for 1,000 shares of Apollo. That's our risk. But our risk isn't $58,000 because we don't think Apollo is going to go to zero. All right. Now, if you want to say, oh, well, what could happen to Apollo? You just look at a long-term chart. And again, I'm not talking about, like Bear Stearns or something like that and going bankrupt, or Lehman Brothers, and suddenly everything falls apart and the world ends and so on and so forth. That's not what we're talking about. What the hell? Oh, there it goes. Wow, it took a long time. But, realistically, what do we think is going to happen to Apollo? So you look back. Well, it doesn't even go further than that. Okay. So you look back, you say, okay, maybe 30. Okay. So let's call 30, figure 30 is the floor. It drops like 50%. Or more than 50%. Oh, like I said, we were at 56 at the time. But say 30 is the floor, and that means what are we risking? We're risking the net between 30 and 58. So we're risking $28,000. That's our risk, and we're risking $28,000 to make $22,000 if all goes well. And we're comfortable with that risk because we feel that Apollo is certainly worth more than $30. And if push comes to shove, our fallback position is owning Apollo. And we already did this, of course, but I'm just saying. So we look at Apollo and we say, well, first of all, it's not even the same company it was when it was $30 a share. It was $1 billion, $2 billion in business, and it was making $100 million, $200, $500 million a year. Now they merged with, they did a merger. They got more stuff going on. They're $4 billion, dropping $2 billion to the bottom line. They more than double the size they were back here. So it's highly, highly unlikely they go back to 30. But that's, we're going to call that our risk being super conservative. So when I'm allocating the position, I'm only going to allocate $28,000 for my worst case scenario. That means that we're selling, it's a quarter of an allocation block. It's a very small entry. We don't really feel anything bad is going to happen. And even if it goes to 30, and now the problem is you can't really, you're not going to be able to see it with Apollo, but I want you to understand like what we, how we look at these things. APO. Who's a $30 stock? Hang on, let's see if we can find a $30 stock. It's not apples to apples, but who is, why are you this? Long-term portfolio. Here we go. All right, so who's a $30 stock? Okay, all right, Mattel. All right. So MT Steel is a $30 stock. It's not as volatile. Obviously you'd be getting better prices because of the volatility of the huge drop. But let's say Apollo dropped down to 35 bucks or 36 bucks. So what happens then? Because don't forget, we're calling the $28,000 risk, but what's the reality of it? Is if they do drop all the way down there, we're going to look at that stock and say, okay, we're down $28,000 on 1,000 shares of stock. How are we ever going to make that up? Well, look at this. We can sell the 2024 $35 calls for $8. That would drop our net from 58 to 50. And we would be selling the $35 calls, but we could also sell the $35 puts for $7. So now we're knocking $15 off the net price, and that drops it down from 58 to 43. And we get called away at 35. And maybe we'd say, okay, you know what, that's good enough. What we're going to do is sell these puts and calls and see what happens. So either we're going to get called away at 35 with a, what I say drops down to 15.43. So we'd have like an $8 loss at 35. All right, but we would obviously be intending to roll it or do something else down the road. But if we're worried about it and we're just going to lick our wounds, then we could just do that now. Or we would get assigned 1,000 more shares at 35, and our average was 43. So 43 and 35 is 78, and that would be 39. So it would drop our basis to 39 if we got assigned. And then we'd have 2,000 shares at 39, $78,000 worth of stock. So, our real worst case is, do we mind owning $38,000 worth of Apollo? I'm sorry, do we mind owning $76,000 worth of Apollo at net 38 when it's trading at 58 now, or 58 when we bought it, or 56, or whatever it was? That's what your risk reward is. You got to think a couple of moves ahead and think about the reality of what's going to happen if they tank. What's going to happen if there's a financial meltdown and everything drops 50%? Are we going to stay with it? Well, it's only a $28,000 risk trade for us. So we're happy to double down at $28,000. It's still only $50,000. We have $200,000 worth of buying power in each allocation block on the long-term portfolio. We have $200,000 of buying power. So it's not going to hurt us. We're not worried about moving up to $50,000, $60,000 of buying power that we're using up, even in a catastrophe. And Apollo is the kind of company that we feel would come back after a crisis, as long as they don't end up going bankrupt. So they could go bankrupt. We could lose our money. It could happen. But you can't play every single thing out of fear also. I mean, why be in the market if you're going to have that kind of attitude about your stocks? It's like try to pick things that won't go bankrupt. And if they do go bankrupt, hopefully you didn't pick a whole portfolio of things that go bankrupt at the same time. And even so, that's what our hedges are for, right? So the point is, we have hedges where we will make money on other stuff as the market goes down, but we have positions that we feel strongly about. So you know, when we're going through the long-term portfolio, this is why it takes me forever. I have to think about this for every single position. There might be a better way, but I haven't figured it out yet. But, you know, we look at every single position one by one by one and think to ourselves, is this a problem? Is Alaska a problem? Is Amgen a problem? Is Boeing a problem? Is Best Buy a problem? If it all hits the fan, am I willing to stick with Boeing? Boeing's at 220. We sold the $200 puts for $30, so we're in for net 170. Am I willing to run Boeing down at 170? Are we willing to stick with it? Are we willing to make Boeing a serious position in our portfolio? And what do I do? Well, now I have to look at W, because W is at 170. It's at 161. So now I look at W. So I'm just trying to get an idea of the pricing to think through like what I would do. So if Boeing hit 160, what would I do? Well, we're in for 170, so it's actually not even a crisis, right? It's only $10 loss on 1,000 shares. It'd be a $10,000 loss. So honestly, if you only have a small loss when something like that happens, you're probably better off sometimes pulling the plug, because that way you can work on the positions you're stuck with. You know, I'm not saying keep every bad position, but I am saying that, you know, you have certain positions you're going to want to work on, and Boeing you can always get back to later, so it's not necessary to hold on to Boeing in this situation. But let's say we do want to hold on to it, what would I do? It's the same thing. If I sold the 160 puts for $50 and I sell the 160 calls for $55, that's $105 off my net 170 price. So now I would be netting into, so I go from 170 minus 105 is $65. God, I almost want it to happen. So we'd be in Boeing for $65 on the first set. So we're being assigned 1,000 shares at 170. We sell the 160 puts and calls for 105, and then we're in for $65. So even if we get called away at 160, we still make a shitload of money. If we get assigned, then we're getting assigned at 160 plus 65, which is 225, and their average would be 112.50. So it goes back to the same thing. So now I'm thinking, okay, there's my worst case. Now I know my worst case. My worst case is I end up owning 1,000 shares of Boeing for 112.50, because we're committed to 500 now at net 170, 200 minus 30. So my worst case is having 1,000 shares of Boeing at 112.50. Now Boeing's at 220 right now. That is half the price of the stock now. So the question is, do I want that to happen or not? I would actually love that. I would love to have 1,000 shares of Boeing for $112. Love it. So therefore, in my mind, in my checklist of my mind, looking at the portfolio, Boeing is a non-issue. I don't care if it says, I don't care what this number says at all. I only care about this number. And I have in my mind that if this number goes below 160, it's something we're going to want to deal with. But as it stands now, there's nothing to deal with. It's fine. So it's not so do I have a risk on Boeing? Of course, I technically have a risk. It could go bankrupt. They can go to $10, whatever. But if they do, then we lose basically 5 times 170, which is, I don't know, $85,000. Yeah, $85,000. All right, so that's ugly, but that's our worst case. Is it going to go bankrupt, so we lose $85,000 or something like that? Not so ridiculously unlikely, it's almost not worth considering, but it doesn't matter. The point is, even the maximum loss is not a big deal. So I don't have any real issue letting Boeing do whatever it's going to do. you know, of course, push comes to shove, we'll make an adjustment or do something. But in reality, it's not something to worry about. 5 short shares of Boeing, a stock I would love to own a ton of if it got much cheaper, unless the laws of, well, who knows? I mean, frankly, they could decide that air travel is too damaging to the planet, and they could severely curtail the airline industry, and Boeing could go bankrupt. Could happen. It's not off the table. It's not likely, but not off the table. Embraer could come up with an all-electric plane that just changes the whole industry, and Boeing also gets blown out of the water by it. You know, obviously anything can always happen to any company to destroy it, right? Somebody can come up with something more fun than cigarettes, and Philip Morris is in trouble. Altria. But the point being, you have to think about the realistic risk of a position and whether you hate the downside or not. If you don't hate the downside, it's not a risk, and therefore you don't have to really worry about the hedge. Now, of course, you have to consider your ability. Do we have the ability to buy $85,000 worth of Boeing? Yeah, we do. We do. That's fine. We could afford that in the portfolio. We can't afford every single one of these to fill. So when the whole portfolio goes down, we've got a problem. But if the whole portfolio goes down, it means the market's going down. If the market's going down, we have $800,000 coming to us from the short-term portfolio, which will help pay for all this. So Best Buy, do we care if we get assigned Best Buy at 70 minus 10, $60? Nope, not at all. Here's what is this, Barclays, I guess. Do we mind owning Barclays 2,000 shares at $10? Not even a thing to consider. That's a nothing. Citibank, do we worry about owning 2,000 shares of Citibank at $50? It's $100,000 worth of Citibank. You know, I'd say no. On the whole, I'm not worried about it. Solid bank, no problem. But it's a big chunk of Citi, so I'd be a little bit concerned about Citibank if the banking industry starts falling apart. Caterpillar, 500 shares of Caterpillar, yes, sir, take it. Chimera, I don't know why we didn't convert this to a stock a long time ago. Coinbase we like a lot, but we haven't really pushed the position. Unfortunately not, because they've been down. Coin is getting a little bit interesting. I like Coin because they're getting into the NFT thing. So yeah, I think it is time to push. Did we not do this? If we didn't do it, it's time to push the button on them. Federal Express, we already, and again, look at the number of 500 shares. Do we want 500 shares of Federal Express? Of course we do. 180 minus 20 is 160. So if it's for net 160, they're it's not going to happen anyway. Frontline Tanker, 5,000 shares at $5, 25,000. You know, not a consideration. I'm not going to spend more than 2 seconds looking. It's $25,000 worth of Frontline. Who cares? IBM, $125,000 worth of IBM. It's a freaking stock of the year. Of course we want it. Is that really? Oh, I know. That's we have another trade somewhere. That's not our only trade. That's bonus short puts on IBM up there. That's not even part of our regular trade. KBH Homes, there's a housing shortage. I absolutely don't mind owning a home builder. Leibu, we were just talking about, and I'm not happy with the way they're positioned right now. I'm not. 30 minus 7 is only 23, and they're at 22. So there's no panic here. Okay, it's only $1 below our entry strike if we end up owning it. So I'm not worried about that. But the thing is, I don't like the way they're running the ETF. I don't know what's going on there, and I need to learn more. I don't think they're holding the stocks I want them to be holding in the biotech. I thought they own more biotech stocks. They own a lot of cash. They're 50% in cash. And maybe they're transitioning, and maybe a lot of things I don't know, I don't understand, and therefore I certainly am not going to run in and make a bigger position out of it. So bears watching. Yeah, and of course they don't have earnings, they're an ETF. So it bears watching. If I don't feel good about them shortly, I'll take the $10,000 loss and get out. That's why have a headache? Levi, why would I ever not want to own Levi? So Levi is 27 minus 7 is $20 for Levi's. We'll take it. Mittal Steel, absolutely want to own them. Pets, they're very disappointing so far, but I like them. Now see, we don't want it. We don't like these guys, but I think this might be a fair enough value. So we're just going to see what happens with earnings. Xerox got no problem owning 1,000 shares of Xerox, and Yeti got no problem owning 1,000 shares of Yeti. There you go. And here it's 65 minus 7, which is what, 58, and their stock's at 69. I don't care that it shows a $3,000 loss. That's ridiculous. How are we down 42% when the stock is at 69 and we're in for net 58? How on earth does that work? It's so wacky. It's not even that volatile. I don't think it is. They make camping equipment and thermoses and coolers. It's not an unsteady business. Omicron is not going to destroy this company. So probably we're going to turn that into a bigger position too, because this is kind of silly. I don't see a good reason for Yeti to be down so much. It's kind of crazy. So anyway, so there you go. So we go through the positions, and you have to think about what's going to happen. What am I going to do? And you also have to kind of keep track of the total money that's going to need to be committed to this. And do you have it? Well, we've got $1.8 million in cash. So we've got a lot of money. And that becomes a hedge. The cash in your portfolio is a hedge. It allows us to mitigate a downturn, but that only works if you're happy to commit to owning more of each stock. And that's why at the moment in an uncertain market, you see me with a lot of 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. And when it's 20, it's a $10 stock. This one's a lot. But that's Citibank is 10 of these, 10 of these. So these, but it's 10 of what? It's 10 of Apple, 10 of these guys. It's 50 of the $5 stock. It's 10 of IBM, which we love. 10 of KBH, 15 of Leibu, which was a mistake apparently. 10, 10, 5. These are not big numbers. If you remember, before we purged all our short puts. That's why they're really, for the most part, all these short puts are since September, because in September we dumped almost all of our short puts out of the long-term portfolio because most of them had made some good money, and the ones they either made good money or we just didn't want them anymore at that point because we were worried about the market coming into the winter. Now we're through the winter and we're starting to, and we've changed. But 6 months ago, we had 30 of these and 40 of those and blah, blah, blah. We had some substantial positions. We became concerned that the market was too toppy and was heading for a downturn. So these are all positions that we're basically happy to double down on. These are small entry positions for the most part. They're either that or companies that we want, that we have no question that we want them, like Caterpillar, IBM, Citibank, ones that we absolutely have faith in. So Randy says, oh, the DOT should be involved in developing standards for car design and safety. Yeah, well, I'm not, again, I'm not talking about car design and safety, though. I'm talking about that they're into. There are rules for like what a car can minimally be able to do, as far as minimal the collision it can take, how if it rolls over, is the roof going to collapse, things like that. Those are rules. You have to design within these parameters. Well, why can't we have these rules for a car that's driving around by itself? What the hell is wrong with people? Why is there a rule saying here's the kind of airbag that goes in a car, but there's not a rule about this is how a self-driving car functions for the safety of all of humanity? Every single car on the road is a potential death trap or death machine or whatever you call it. And not just for, and again, the problem is not just for the passengers. It's for every single person walking across a street that expects a car to follow the rules. And somebody, I don't know if this was the same case, but I think you guys might remember that like a Tesla mowed somebody down like a couple of years ago in a self-driving test, and they just settled. They just settled like for a good amount of money. The driver had to pay because they should not have been, they should not have been using the autopilot mode without paying attention or whatever the thing is. And that's a gray area too, by the way, because I think that's bullshit. If you're going to sell me a car that drives itself, how am I going to be held responsible for the malfunction of that car? I mean, first of all, now we're not there yet, but eventually cars are going to come with no steering wheels, right? You're going to sit in a little box like the back of a taxi, like the back of an English taxi. Anyway, you'll sit in a box with some friends and you'll hang out, and the car's going to drive you somewhere. Why would you need a wheel? In theory, the car should be a better driver than you are, right? Like in video games, that's actually the best indication that self-driving tech can work is car video games, because in car video games, they drive better than you do, right? There's pretty much no way you're going to beat a computer driver in a car video game. But those are two-dimensional. That's the problem. Three-dimensional world, and also every possible variable is introduced in the program by the programmer. There's no outside variables. In the real world, there are outside variables. Things fall from the sky and hit your car. As a former northerner, I can tell you that when you're driving down the highway in the wintertime, like right now, sometimes a sheet of ice peels off the back of a truck, not the back, the top of a truck. So in other words, it snows, the snow melts, it freezes, the top of the truck has a layer of ice on it, and as the sun warms it up, it cracks, and then the wind catches it, and all of a sudden a big giant sheet of ice comes heading for your car. This is not a normal road hazard, but it happens. You have to decide whether to swerve or to take the hit, basically. And you have to then think and look around you and say, well, if I swerve, who am I going to hit? If I take the hit, what's going to happen? Because you can get hit, you can crack your windshield with those things. They're nasty. I've swerved to avoid a big tire coming off a truck. Tire is bigger than my car, bouncing along the road. Obviously deer. I was driving along and a deer came leaping off the side of the road, not the highway, on a regular, more on a regular road. I was driving probably 30, 40 miles an hour, and all of a sudden the deer, and there was an embankment on the sides of the road, and he leapt from above where my car was down the road. Thank God he did one of those things which was, really cool, where he like leaps, but he's like in the middle of running. So he leapt and he moved and he jumped so quickly into his second jump that I didn't hit him. But I was screwed. He was right in front of me. I was barely able to hit the brakes, and I would have definitely hit him. But he got out of the way before I hit him. And I don't think he was paying any attention to me, or he might have frozen. But you think back on these things and you think about, like, how the hell are you going to prepare a car for all of these possible things? And then when push comes to shove, the car is going to have to make a decision on what is the least risky thing to do. And that's going to involve killing somebody or risking somebody's life over somebody else's life. That's what you do. When a sheet of ice is coming at you, and it's coming at you like it's like time slows down. You see things clearly. It's like there's a sheet of ice coming off a truck. You think about the angle that it's tipping at and how it's going to hit your window. You think about your window and how strong it is, or what kind of angle your window is at. You think about how heavy it is. You think about who's in the car with you. If my kids are in the car, I make a different decision than if it's just me. You think about, okay, and then you think about looking left and right. You start thinking about, like, who am I endangering by swerving? And you're doing all this in like a tenth of a second. And the computer program's got to do that too. But the thing is, what are these decisions? If my child is next to me in the car and a sheet of ice is coming at her spot, I'm moving that car. All of a sudden, my weightings change very dramatically, right? If I'm by myself in the car and I look to the right and there's a family car or something like that, I'm not going anywhere near it. And then I start thinking about, well, if it hits me and bounces off of them, and then what's going to happen to them, and blah, blah, blah. You got to think about a lot of crap. But at some point, you're making life and death decisions. Now we got to think about who's responsible for this stuff. These cars are ultimately going to have to make life and death decisions. And then the question is, who's responsible? And let me see if this is... See if we can get the facts of this thing. Uber. It was Uber, it wasn't Tesla. Uber sale. I wonder if that's the one I was reading about, though. Is this today? No, this is really old. Nah, that's not the one I was thinking of. Uber, Tesla. Nope. Damn it. Wait, California files an appeal to intervene in the discrimination lawsuit. See, I told you they had one of those. I don't know. I saw it today. Anyway, maybe it hasn't hit the things yet. Randy said, oil report. There's no oil report, Tom. I don't think, because of the holiday. So Randy says, I love the GM commercial where the drivers take their hands off the wheel and clap to we will rock you. Yeah, but like I said, the reality is that we're all going to just sit in a car and the car is going to drive us somewhere, which is fine if they get it working right. But meanwhile, if that car kills somebody, whose fault is that? It's got to be the manufacturer's fault. It can't be your fault. And of course, the argument is it's your car. Now, here we go into other things. Did you maintain your car properly? That is your fault, right? If you own a self-driving car and it's made to operate a certain way, but you ignored a light that was on for a month that told you some sensor was out or some bullshit like that, or you didn't take it in for its checkup and it has a faulty something, then it is your fault, I guess, right? If that then leads to the accident. But we're opening up a whole can of worms with this stuff. It's going to be very interesting. The whole new world. What are we talking about? The EI. It is my understanding that we do not have a petroleum status report because it'll be tomorrow. Now, see, it's from January 7th because they didn't do it yet. So where were we? We were talking about the selection of things. Oh yeah. So we go through, going through everything. We did that this morning, obviously, in the review. But every stock, you have to think to yourself, what happens? Okay, what am I going to do if it drops 20%? Realistically, anything can drop 20%. So you always have to have a plan for what you're going to do if it drops 20%. And if you like your plan, then fine. But the same rule of thumb applies to all these stocks down here. You have to look at your puts very carefully and think about, can I stand being assigned 1,000 Apollos? Can I stand being assigned 1,000 Baba? And that's questionable, right? We're already down. Look, we're down $42,000 on the Alibaba puts. It's 200 minus 33, which is 160, whatever, 166, and it's at 129. We're not that far below it, but that's a fair assessment. We're down 30,000 bucks at least, even if it closed today. So, but 2023. Now the thing about that is though, the 2023 were they 200 puts BABA. Stop it. So those are what? The 200 puts are 75 bucks. So then we look at 2024 and say, what's 75 bucks? Well, ew, that's ugly. So they're so deep in the money, it's a problem. So basically 190 puts or whatever. 50 bucks is the 160 puts in 2024. And half of that, 35 bucks, is the 135 puts. 135 puts is at the money. So now I have to say, okay, with Alibaba, are we willing to own 2,000 shares at 135? Well, you know what we are, because realistically, we're in for 40,000 bucks already, right? So we either pay 45, so we pay 42,000 just to get out of this thing, or we leave it. Well, obviously we're going to leave it where it is for now and see what happens. At the moment, we're down 40,000 bucks. If we are committed to owning 200 minus 33 is what we're committed to owning $170,000 worth of Alibaba. All right, or if we roll to 20 of the 135 puts that were $35, so $35, that'd be roughly the same, roughly this, it's going to be 70,000 bucks, cost us 5,000 bucks to roll it. We collected 33,000. So let's drop that down to 28,000. So then we have 2,000 shares. I'm sorry, 2,000 times 135. That's our commitment. Minus, what do we say? We drop that down to 38. So minus 38,000 is 232,000 back to dividing by 2,000 shares, 116. So we're committing to owning 2,000 shares for $116, which is $232,000 versus, if we left it alone, we're committing to $165,000 or $167,000. So for $60,000 more dollars, not even $55,000 more dollars, we get twice as many shares. So it would be silly not to do that. So we're going to roll. We don't have to roll now. There's no emergency need to do it. It could still bounce back. We're waiting to see what earnings say. But Alibaba's under some pretty constant pressure and constant attack. So we'll see what happens, because they're talking now about reviewing their cloud services to see if there's any spyware threat, blah, 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 blah. I mean, we are, surprisingly, we're being worse on China now than Trump was. Trump talked a good game, but Biden's actually doing crap and really cracking down on things. So it may just become unworkable to invest in Chinese companies. I think that might be part of their goal right now. Plus, China's economy is a real mess. Anyway, so going through all of these stocks, which we just did this morning, so we don't need to do it again, but going through all these stocks one by one, I didn't get heavily into it. That's why I wanted to catch up on it now. But you've got to look and say, do I mind this commitment? Do I mind this commitment? You see here, we've got a lot of these puts are -10s, -5s. We didn't really overdo it too much on the put commitments. And we try to keep things proportional as much as possible. And we didn't make a lot of changes. See, we added here, we sold some March calls. Oh, and by the way, it's another thing. If you didn't sell calls, it's a hedge, right? When you sell some short calls, you're hedging. And it doesn't matter that you don't cover everything, but when you sell $50,000, $100,000 worth of short calls, that's another $50,000 to $100,000 worth of hedges that you've added to your portfolios. And it is, in the end, it's all about balance. It's all about having a comfortable balance that you can work on. Here's in chat here up saying, what is your take on the metaverse? Do you think it's viable in the near term? I know all these people, a bunch of benefit and say acquiring assets. That's interesting. Look, Facebook changed their name to Meta. Facebook has 3 billion users, active monthly users, and they changed their name to Meta. They are firmly convinced that the metaverse is the future, and I imagine to some extent it is. There's Spielberg made this movie, Ready Player One. In 2018, Spielberg made this movie in 2018, Ready Player One. And I don't know if this works if I do this. Just do a quick thing just to give you an idea. But my name's Blake Watts. Where is it? No. Okay, see, here's what he does. He puts on, this is life in the near future. Puts on his thing, and he's transported to a virtual world, which stupidly looks like this world, except it's got cartoon characters and dinosaurs and things like that. They play racing games, they do stuff, but they actually, they live here. They don't really live home. They live here, and there's clubs and places to go. So in this world, this virtual world, all these people interact and live, and it's one great big place that basically the whole world goes to. Now, whether that happens because, like Facebook, does one company dominate? Okay, because even in this movie, they call it the something, I forget what they call it, but it's called the hub or whatever it's called. But there's this one company that dominates the metaverse, and it's all owned by this incredible rich guy, blah, 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 and he's leaving it to somebody. Who cares about the plot? But the point is, everybody goes to this one thing, just like everybody goes to Facebook, though. People go to Facebook. Yeah, you go to Amazon also, you go to this place also, but Facebook dominates a certain aspect of your life, of the social, connecting to family, friends. Frankly, Facebook has taken over postcards and letters and phone calls, frankly. I mean, it's, Facebook is how you communicate with your friends and family. And by the way, not me. If I log on to Facebook once every couple of months, it's a lot. I don't like it. And I mostly don't like it because it's just it's too trivial for me. It's too shitted up with advertising and things from if I knew how to turn it off, that'd be great. But I liked it when it was just my friends and family and it was fun and we could catch up, but you're just constantly being advertised to. I paid good money on my television not to be advertised to. and I go onto Facebook, and it's all ads, and a lot of the people who are reaching out to you from the past want something. They're like, oh, and by the way, I sell insurance, whatever, or oh, do you have, I was looking to borrow some money for this and that. It's just, it's not for me. I mean, I God bless, I love seeing what people I know are doing, but I know the kids don't even like it, and they're going like on Instagram and things like that, which I think is still Facebook. I don't know, one of them is anyway. TikTok, of course, very popular, but but the point is, they still 3 billion people a day, a month log into Facebook, or monthly, not a month, but a monthly active users. People in any given month, 3 billion different people get on Facebook. And they believe in the metaverse. They believe that's going to be a thing of the future. But this is, again, the metaverse is not a place. There's no sign outside of our planet that says this way to the metaverse. The metaverse, I can, PSW can be a metaverse. We can make our own little universe of PSW, and people have to come and pay admission and come in or whatever. Or we can make it open and let people come in and communicate, and then whatever. Maintaining it and doing all this would be a massive headache, of course. Just like any online platform, when you have huge amounts of users, you'd have to deal with it. But so Facebook can have one, and Apple could have one, and Microsoft can have one, and they could all have different metaverses. And if you're in one, you have to leave and go to the other one, which means, why are you buying property in one place? It doesn't make any sense. Or you could think that eventually they'll all kind of be linked. So it's like having a web address. So in other words, if I buy a property in this metaverse place, let's say I buy a property in the Apple metaverse, okay? If you are coming from the Facebook metaverse, you would still be able to visit me in my Apple metaverse property. It would just be on, like, you go through the gate door that says Apple, and you end up and then you can find directions to my place or whatever, however it works. But it goes back to, are people going to want to do this? Sure. Are people going to put on a headset and be in a world that's like got all this cool stuff and whatever? Yeah. Are we ready for that yet? No. You can see ways where this could be great. You can virtually go, and especially if this viruses and disease keep coming. I mean, this will be a perfect activity for people who don't go anywhere. But so in other words, I can put on a headset and go to the Louvre instead of having to go to France to go to the Louvre. Obviously, now you could argue, obviously, you should be going to the real Louvre, but it gets to a certain point where you can barely tell the difference. And if I want to walk around Paris, like I don't know how close the experience can really be, but like, I would love to be able to sit in a living room with my cousins in England and like have an actual conversation. And if you could do that and accomplish it here, then great. Then sign me up. I'll go over and check on people and be able to virtual presence myself and whatever. Can you do that with FaceTime now? Sure you can. But the closer to reality it gets, the more interesting it gets. And I can see a place for it in the world. But these people running out and buying properties and things, I think they're idiots. I just don't understand what they think they're doing. And again, the NFT people and the coin people are jumping all over this, the crypto people, because they say, oh, here's a perfect way for where people need cryptocurrencies and people need NFTs, and here's a place where it's more real than regular currency. They want you to move to the metaverse and start transacting with cryptocurrency and buying NFTs and so on and so forth. That's their platform. But in a couple of years, no, we're not there yet. We're really not, unless Corona gets so bad that we are all trapped in our homes for 2 more years, and then we'll be ready to do whatever the hell we can to get out of here. But we will see. I mean, times are changing, and again, look, things change quickly. I remember when I was a kid, my parents used to always try to get me to write a letter. And they'd be like, why don't you write a letter or at least write a postcard, so this cousin and that cousin's like, oh, you came back from a trip and you didn't write them. You should write them and thank them and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, no, I called them already. I talked to them on the phone. Like, that's not the same thing. It's like a phone call wasn't as good as a letter. And now I tell my kids text. And I tell my kids, why don't you call? Whatever you grew up with is the right thing to do. That's in your head. Like, my parents grew up writing letters. They thought writing letters was the proper way to communicate. I grew up with phones. We think calling somebody shows you care, and my kids think a text shows you care. And I know that those of you who are older than my kids probably wince at that and go, a text does not show you care. A text shows you're doing the least possible. But I guess that's basically the way my parents felt about a phone call, that it was lazy. It didn't show any thought. It didn't show any effort, whatever. It's all you did is dial a couple of numbers and talk for a few minutes and you're done. Meanwhile, I've exchanged more information in my 2-minute phone call than I would in a few pages of letter writing. And I like letter writing. I like letters. But I haven't written one in 20 years, but I like them conceptually. And no email does not count. But again, that's me as an old timer. I'm like, emails don't count. That's not a letter. I have, because of my kids, I have developed a robust texting life with my family, my kids and my family on the whole. We have a pretty good system set up where everybody texts everybody, and we're in these group chats and whatever, and we're kind of actively involved. It's not a Facebook thing. I like it better to be on the text. It's like a private little thing for the family. Nobody's advertising at us. Nobody's nudging in. It's just the people we invite into our group chat, and we share little things and share our own pictures. And the world doesn't get to see it. It's just for us. We make our own private jokes, and we have our own pictures, and we share our own memories, and it's very nice, and I like it. The world doesn't need to see it. But, so long term, it's hard to predict how much the metaverse stuff will catch on. But I'm sure it will. I'm sure there's going to be, in a world of, just think of the opportunity. In a world of 8 billion people, 1 billion people are going to be using it for sure. And currently 0 are using it. Therefore, you have a massive opportunity to capture a 1 billion person market. It's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. It's going to happen. That's for sure going to be a thing. It's the next evolution of computer. And there's going to be a lot of money to be made in this stuff. When? Over time. So who do you want to invest in? Clearly, until they figure something else out, the people who make headsets, the people who make the connectivity stuff, the internet companies, of course, it's the same crap though. It's still Cisco, Intel, AT&T. They're in our portfolio. Not Cisco because of we're worried about chip shortages. Cisco is not like Intel. Intel makes their own chips. I'm not worried about them having chip shortages so much as Cisco, who needs to buy a lot of chips to make their boxes. But Cisco is a very important company also down the road. So, I think it's an early stage thing, and it's the same kind of thing I said about 3D printing. People said it's 10 years ago. Is 3D printing the future? Of course it's the future. Freaking incredible. We will one day 3D print our dinners. We will one day 3D print our clothing, but it's not ready yet. And to pick a company and to say this company is hot on this and hot on that, it's foolish. And I said that at the time. I said the only company I care about for 3D printing is really Hewlett Packard, because when it's ready, when it matures, they're going to be interested in the thing. But if they don't have a 3D printer, it isn't there yet. It just isn't ready as a technology. And here we are 10 years later, still not ready. And this is the same thing, okay? When it's ready, it'll be ready, and you can start picking the people who do it. But for now, the basics. Best Buy will sell stuff that people will wear. Intel will make chips. AT&T will connect people. Cisco will have routers for internet services, so on and so forth. That's how you invest in these things. You pick stocks that move with the trends. But don't pick a little dopey company that says we have the best metaverse, we do this and that. You don't. You don't know where it's going. You don't know what form it's going to take. You don't know what direction it's going to be. It's just speculating at this point when you pick these small companies that have, just slap the name, just like .com. Just like everything, whenever there's a new trend. .com was only 20 years ago. Can you imagine that? The whole internet fad, 1999, was 23 years ago. And it all blew up in everyone's faces. And here we are every freaking year after that. And we still get sucked into like the next thing, and everybody's still chasing after the next big thing and this big thing. Nobody learned. Nobody ever learns. 99% of these companies go bust. They don't make it. You don't need to be in these companies when they're starting. You need to be in the ones that actually succeed. Yeah, it would have been great to pick up Facebook the day they went public. But you know what? You had a long, long time to invest. Apple too. Apple was high, then it went down, then it went up and down, this and that. Google, everybody does this kind of stuff. We knew Google was going to be successful 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It was very obvious that Google was going to be successful. Many, many opportunities to get in there and make 10 times your money. Look at Intuitive Surgical. Intuitive Surgical is a medical metaverse. That was one we used to pick and play. It got too expensive. We stopped playing it. But again, they keep going up and up and up because it's the future of medicine. Of course it is. A skilled surgeon, you know how you fly to the best surgeon in the world? Now you don't have to fly to the best surgeon in the world. The best surgeon in the world gets on a little one of these, basically one of these things that this kid's got on. He puts on the goggles, he puts the controllers on his hands, and he operates on you wherever you happen to be. Because all he has to do is be hooked up to the internet, which connects him to the machine that does the actual surgery. But it's not the machine doing it. The doctor guides the machine and does what needs to be done. But for the doctor, it's just like you're right in front of him. And for you, it's just like the doctor's working on you if he's standing at the table, but you guys can be the other side of the world apart, and it works. And what's the benefit here? The benefit is the surgeon doesn't have to go to the hospital. He doesn't have to, or he's probably at some hospital, but the surgeon doesn't have to travel. He doesn't have to spend days of his time. He can operate on 3 people in 1 day instead of 1 person in 3 days. It's a huge difference. It's life-changing stuff. And of course it's going to catch on. And of course it is catching on. But you don't have to jump on these things the minute you hear about them. You can wait and see how they mature and figure out. It's like betting on a horse race in the last quarter mile. You don't need to bet on the horses in the first thing. It's like you don't have to guess which horse is good based on how they strut up to the gate. You can watch them race all the way around the track. And by the time they get to the last quarter mile, you pretty much know that these, here's 8 horses that won't make it, and here's 3 that are in the lead. And then start making your bet. And all 3 of them are going to finish. You didn't have to guess what's going to happen. You can pick the leaders, and they're still going to finish the race, and they're still going to make money. And if you pick, especially when you're in an industry with the growth potential that this kind of stuff has, it's like it's never going to stop. It's going to be a huge thing. It's it's the next big wave, apparently. But to sit there and start throwing money into stuff now, it's just too early. So Brendan says, speaking of the future, talk about CRISPR. Oh yeah, see now CRISPR is a good one too. CRISPR, I think, didn't we just talk about getting some CRISPR? What did I say about that? Was that yesterday? Oh well. Anyway, so CRISPR is another one. CRISPR, they're editing genes. They're editing your DNA. They can repair it. They can do stuff. I don't really, I don't get all the science of it. It's very, it's a complicated concept, but they can actually fix DNA, change DNA, and do stuff. So of course that's the future. And it's incredible technology, but it's very early stages. But now these guys seem to have a patent and seem to have a very big lead on other people. So it's a little bit different because it's not like gene editing is not like a category of societal development. Like now it may become one. And I expected this for in fact, my whole life. In fact, when I was in high school, I wrote a story about a couple who wasn't satisfied with they didn't get what they wanted for the kid they ordered. They ordered a kid to be designed a certain way and it didn't come out right. And they decided to abort after he was born. It was a good moral story because they wanted an abortion of the child that was delivered because he was defective. He didn't have what they wanted. They wanted a certain color eye. They wanted a certain type of this. They wanted certain skill sets, and he wasn't displaying them. So they were basically saying, well, we got to terminate this pregnancy. It's not a pregnancy, though. It's a baby like sitting in the crib. And they're like, we got to start again. This is no good. It was a good story. Anyway, so it raised many moral questions. But in other words, people have become jaded enough where, like, the kid, it's like getting a kid from Amazon. It's like, here's your baby as you requested, and it's not what we want, so get rid of it. So is that going to happen? Yeah, of course. Of course. If you want a blue-eyed, blonde-haired kid who's going to be tall and be good at sports and so on and so forth, and then obviously not be prone to cancer and have asthma or anything like that, of course you're going to do that. Maybe not everybody, just like not everybody gets vaccinated, but of course a lot of people are going to say, how do you want your baby? Not, I hope he has this, I hope he has this. It's like, here, check, take that, yep, want that, get that, need that, don't want that. Here's what you can choose from, and you'll sit down with a counselor, and the counselor's going to say, based on you and your wife's genes, you can do this or that, you can do this or that, you can do this or that. We can take them and put them the way you want. In fact, oh, look, you have a recessive gene for blue eyes. We can bring that right up to the front. So is that going to be a thing? Of course it's going to be a thing. Is CRISPR going to be the only company that does it? Do they have an ironclad patent? Is there maybe a better way to do it? Maybe, who knows? But at the moment, they seem to be a nice leader and worth a bet. I wouldn't, it's not the kind of thing I'd bet my whole future on, but I do like them as they stand now. And oh, didn't we, like yesterday, we just put a new trade in, right? Wasn't that what we did? I think that was yesterday. Because something reminded me of it. Oh, I know what it was. I thought we had the other guys. Yeah. So, I mean, I wrote about this yesterday. So, it's basically, so we added for the Futures Now portfolio, and it's the thing, and we just took a smallish position. But I think it's good, and I think it's a nice potential. But what I especially liked about it, though, is that we can sell we're only laying out $4,500, and we can make that back selling partial covers. So we're going to end up with a free trade, and we can then see how it goes along the way. So it's a nice, good future sort of play, but it's speculative, and I wouldn't bet the farm on it, but it's a nice thing to play with. So that was yesterday in the member chat room where we had it. What time is this? 10:30. I think I'm the top trade, in fact. And Neil says one of the thoughts on CL and the EIA report, and again, there's no EIA report because it'll be tomorrow. But do I think oil is too expensive? Absolutely. I mean, this is silly. There's really well, it's coming down a little bit now, but there's no basis for this. But there is no basis for 85, and there's no basis for 80. But you have to, and again, this is tricky when you're playing the futures. If you can't afford to take the loss and ride something out, you end up getting forced to sell at the worst possible time. At the moment, I'm sitting on a pretty painful loss, like $30-something thousand, and I have to just wait for this thing to calm down. Just got to be patient and hope that it does. Oh dear! And look, everybody's turning down again. This is not good. We're failing all the bounces. So this is an ugly looking thing. Look at natural gas coming down too. That's a big loss for one day. Holy crap. That went from 33 to 30 cents, like almost 10% down in a day. That's very ugly. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, what else is going on? So CRISPR, yeah. So sickle cell is a disease that affects, I don't know, like 1 million people. I don't know if it's 1 million people a year or 1 million people total, but whatever it is, it's a serious problem. And so there's a multi-billion-dollar thing. I mean, obviously, if 1 million people have something and they cure it for $5,000, that's $5 billion, right? It's not like the people are going to not want the cure. And for an insurance company, it's cheaper than chronically treating people with the disease. So therefore, they sign everybody up and say, "Oh yeah, go ahead and get cured." Crazy. Where did I write this? Oh, here. CRISPR has shown large progress. The first disease it decided to target, which is sickle cell anemia. CRISPR now has trial data. 22 patients show that all of the patients were cured after one treatment. Okay, that is like Jesus curing lepers. You come in, you sit down, they treat you, and you no longer have the disease. Get out of here. And they are looking, and so these guys are looking. And what are they doing? They're changing your DNA. Your DNA is defective. That's what causes the disease. Therefore, if they fix your DNA, which apparently they can do, and I don't know how that works, but they can apparently fix your DNA, and if they fix it, you no longer have the problem. The next thing they're moving on to is preventing cancer. They're looking to, I don't think they can cure cancer. I think they can make you immuno-oncology. I believe what they're talking about is maybe they can make you better at fighting cancer even if you have cancer, but apparently they can make it so you're less susceptible to cancer. There are certain animals that don't get cancer. And so basically they're trying to identify those characteristics and imbue them into people. And it goes back to, and I made a joke yesterday about, like, this is the company that's going to give you spider powers. But that's what it is. We are 99% compatible with an earthworm in our DNA. There's not a lot of difference between us and a mouse and a snake and a rat and a spider we all have basically the same DNA because we all kind of come from the same family tree on Earth. So if you want characteristics of certain things, you can theoretically get them. Now, this can go really weird and crazy, and there's serious moral issues here, and I'm sure a lot of religious people will think this is horrifying. But there are going to be people who want fur, and they will get fur. There's a lot of shit that's going to happen that's going to be weird. There are going to be people who want cheetah legs or whatever, or the whatever it is that you can do to muscle up your legs or be faster or be stronger, be able to breathe underwater. Who knows? You might even be able to give people gills. Who knows what they can freaking do? You can change people's DNA into something else. And obviously that's got to be very, very complicated. If you have gills, you must have a whole bunch of other shit in your body that would matter, that would do something. And can you have gills and lungs at the same time? Yes, you can, because there's a lungfish, so that has gills and lungs. But that's crazy stuff. It's like science fiction. But down the road, yeah, you can customize. But again, like I said, it's not really customization. But the thing is, doctor's going to sit there one day and he's going to say to you, and we think it's horrible. We can't even imagine how somebody could do such a thing. But same thing with vaccinations, frankly. I mean, there are people who think that that's an abomination. But one day, our kids, our grandchildren are going to not think nothing of it. And they're going to sit down when they're ready to have a kid, and they're going to pick it like a Chinese menu and say, I want this, I want that, I don't want this, I want that. And it'll be a given that they're going to be screened for all sorts of diseases and all kinds of other stuff to make sure they come out healthy. And then those people will think it's barbaric to randomly have children. They'll say, how could you have a child that might have a disease? How could you possibly let yourself have a child that could have a disability? How could you let yourself have a child that might have nearsightedness? Why would you even do that? Why would you condemn your child to a life of difficulty? They're going to look back and say, how do we make a choice? And they're going to have fights with the people in the future who are going to say that they want their children naturally, and they're going to say naturally. That's horrifying. So a lot of crap's going to happen, but I mean, again, you have. It's hard to imagine how much things are going to change in 50 years, right? Because, 50 years ago, well, 50 years ago was 1970, right? Yeah. So 50 years ago in 1972, we had AM radio in our cars. We had AM radio in our gas guzzling cars, and we had only just put somebody on the moon in a tin can rocket. We did not have a cell phone. We did not have a computer. They barely had computers anywhere. I mean, the computer that sent people to the moon was, your phone is way, way more complicated than that. Your cell phone is 1,000 times more powerful than the phone they sent people to the moon with, than the computer that NASA sent people to the moon with. We didn't have vaccines. We didn't have cures for a lot. We had vaccines, but not for everything. We had didn't have cures for a lot of diseases. We didn't have the same fabrics. We didn't have Velcro. Think of that crazy stuff like that. We didn't have sneakers. We had sneakers. We had Keds or something like that. What were the sneakers back then? Did they even have Adidas in 1972? I mean, we had really basic, horrible sneakers. That was like what we wore on our feet. The world changed a lot, and that's 50 years. Go back 50 years more, 1922, obviously, things were even crazier. And you go back turn of the century, 150 years, and it's the Dark Ages. There was no electricity 150 years ago. There was no phones 150 years ago. Then you needed letters, but you couldn't put your letter on a plane. So, but you put a letter on a boat to go overseas. You put it on you put it on a wagon to go across country. So when you talk about things and when they're changing, we're so used to the pace of change is just increasing faster and faster and faster. And literally, 50 years ago, the world was a completely different place. Bordering on what my kids call black and white days. My kids were little. They thought the whole world was in black and white before, back when we were kids, because they would see black and white pictures and they would see black and white TV shows, and they just thought like something happened to the world. Like there's a show about that, like Pleasantville or something. There's some movie about that. But they thought that at some point the world got colorized. And they used to call it black and white days, the old days. So we lived in that, and you'd say you lived in black and white days. What do you know? We're in color days now, and we're obviously heading into 3D days and 4D days, and it's hard to even imagine what's going to happen 50 years from now. To say is really tough. I was a big science fiction reader when I was a kid, and I used to think about the future all the time. And you get some stuff right. We were supposed to have robots and flying cars and things like that, and we're just getting there. 50 years is a long time, but we're getting there for robots and flying cars. But that's another thing, robotics. So speaking of things that are going to be obviously take over the world, how are robots not going to take over the world? They work all day long. They don't take a break. They don't complain. They don't have coffee breaks. And they're going to do the job correctly every time. So of course they're going to replace the labor force. That's obvious. And it's funny because people don't ask about that. People ask about, like, oh, how do we get involved in the metaverse? What about how do we get involved in robotics? Robotics are going to be everywhere. There are going to be 1 billion robots. And the robot's going to cost as much as a car, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. But you know what? That's cheaper than a person. If I can buy a robot for $40,000 and it can replace your lazy ass at work, I'm going to buy one. What do I get when I pay you? What do I get when I pay you $20 an hour for a year, which is what, $800 a week, right? Yeah, $800 a week, and then 50 weeks is $40,000. Seriously? Wow, it adds up fast, huh? So I pay a person $40,000 for a year. I got nothing. I buy a robot for $40,000. I got a robot at the end of the year. He's still there. I don't have to pay him next year. I paid him off. Maybe he only lasts 3 years. So what? Still cheaper than you. So you think I'm not going to do that? That's like thinking people aren't going to buy machines for their factories. So I think the robot trend is probably a bigger trend than this other stuff we talk about. And that's going to happen hard and fast because it makes economic sense. And I said that a couple of years ago when McDonald's started putting kiosks in the store, and they said, oh, isn't that cute? They have a kiosk and you can order here if you want. Now there's no people. Not everywhere, but it's happening in a lot of McDonald's. There's no people in McDonald's, and you have no choice but to order at the kiosk. And if you can't order at the kiosk, they don't want you there. I thought they would at least have a person at the counter that would take an order if you wanted to not use the kiosk. No. These McDonald's stores, all kiosk, no counter. There is no counter service because apparently they don't want to encourage people in any way, shape, or form to not use the kiosk. So it's not optional. This is how you order. You walk up there and you punch buttons. And then somebody hands you your order when it's ready. No interacting with the customers anymore. That's passé. And you know what's next? Next, they replace those counter workers. Next, the people who are handing you the order will become robots. And the food will be made automatically, and soon McDonald's will eventually be just a big giant machine that you walk into. And that's the future. And frankly, there's places in Japan like that now, and people think it's really cool, and it is really cool. But you know, it's cool until you start thinking about what about the jobs? What's going to happen to people? It's going to be very interesting. All right. Anyway, so meanwhile, all we can do is do the best we can and find the stocks that we can invest in. Now, you might say after that talk, you might say, well, so what's the robotics companies? We don't know. We don't really know. We don't know who's going to make the good robots. We don't know who's going to make the all-purpose industrial robots. But as it develops, we'll see people moving into the forefront. The guys who make these things, you know, an Amazon warehouse has robots running all over the floor, bringing stuff from one place to another, and so on and so forth. You know, you want to find out who it is, and that's keep your eye on that kind of stuff. Who makes these things? Who's doing this automation software? And again, I like the chip companies. You know, we have the investment. We have Micron. We have Intel. We're going to get Cisco, but they're still having some struggles with their supply, so we're not worried about Cisco yet. You know, because robots need chips. Robots need chips. Robots need a communication system. They need some kind of an internet to work across. They need hubs. That's why I like Cisco. And we have to think about like what, you know, transcending which robot company is going to win. All robots need chips. All robots need communications. That's the stuff you want to know, right? Don't try to figure out which robot company is the best. You're not going to be able to know. The technology is going to go all kinds of different places. It's like picking a car company in 1905. You know, what makes you know that Ford is better than the other guys and the 100 and something companies have failed? Why is Henry Ford the winner? You don't really know that, but by 1920, you pretty much know for sure that Ford's going to be one of the winners. And meanwhile, 90% of his competition failed. So instead of trying to pick the winner, let somebody show their head. Let somebody show that they know what they're doing. That's how we make a good value investment. And that's how we can get out there and win this game. You know, and I love figuring out the trends. I love seeing what's going on in the future. All right. So, and hedging now, very, very important. This was the day we talked about hedging, right? It was yesterday. So, very important that you have good hedges because we don't know what's going to happen right now. I don't know what is happening now. Stop that. YM. There you go. Oh, no, back to the lows, 168 points down. This thing, it just wants to break down. You can see these charts. They just want to get lower. They're being supported. But when this support breaks down, and again, we have very low volume too. So it won't take much of a catalyst to push them down. But you got to have these hedges. Not necessarily these hedges, but you have to have some kind of hedges in your portfolio, protecting your portfolio. That's, you know, you got to protect these positions because we don't know when this thing is going to fall apart or if it's going to fall apart. But don't take a chance and don't be too bullish because things are changing very rapidly. And there's a lot of uncertainty and the inflation is really out of control in a bad way. And I don't know what the Fed's going to say next week. They basically indicated there's no way they're going to cut next week. And I'm not cut, sorry, raise rates. There's a, you know, I don't know why they don't. It doesn't make sense to me. If you say you're going to raise rates 4 times this year, and you wait until March to raise rates, why? You know you want to raise rates. You want to raise rates 4 times or 3 times at least. Why not raise them now 1/4 point and see how that goes for 3 months instead of waiting while things get worse? And I know what they're waiting for. They're waiting because Omicron is a serious problem, and they don't want to raise rates as everything is falling apart because things are closing and supply chain is bad and so on and so forth. I get that, but inflation is still out of control, regardless of everything else. Clearly, inflation is out of control. It will only get more out of control over the next 2 months. It will not get better on its own. If they tighten right now, just a 1/4 point, and inflation eases off a little bit, even if Omicron's a separate thing, they can say that's transitory. You can't say inflation is transitory. It's not. It's getting deeply embedded in everything. And again, when they raise the wages, they embed the inflation because you're not going to be able to take that back. You raise the wages, everybody's got better wages, they spend more on stuff, there's more money in circulation, you've created permanent inflation at that point. All right, so that's what we're looking out for. We're watching out for the permanent inflation, and the Fed and what they're going to react and how they're going to take care of it. And as I said, Biden can't get he can't get anything passed. Nothing. The Republicans have stopped everything from happening in Congress, and there's no stimulus. There's no bailout money, there's no this, there's no that. And I just read an article in England, not in America yet, but in England, which is a little bit ahead of us on the Omicron thing, restaurants are failing in large numbers. They can't take it. Look, let's go back to, we're talking about Cheesecake Factory today. And I like Cheesecake Factory, but Cheesecake Factory lost $500 million in the last 2 years. Well, that looks wrong. Something's wrong about this. How could this be the exact same number twice? All right, let's take that back. I don't know if one of these may not be correct. It doesn't make sense. It would be the exact same number, exact. The same sales, the same profit, the same net. That just does not seem likely, right? Something's wrong. Anyway, bottom line, whatever the court case is, they lost $200 million last year. Now, they can take it. I'm not worried about them. I like Cheesecake Factory. But you think about that from the perspective of companies that don't have money, that weren't strong going into this thing. And I don't mean public companies. You know, QSR is another one I like, restaurant brands. This is Burger King and Popeyes and Tim Hortons Donuts. That's one of the ones I really like about them. They didn't even lose money last year. So I don't know why they're so far down. I mean, look at the stock. Here's 5 years. So 2019, 66. Now they're at like 56. Not terrible, but they were at 69, and now they're at 56. So a pretty good sell-off. Why? They're fine, and not only are they fine, they didn't even lose money last year. But when you look at the restaurants that did lose money, I wonder how McDonald's did. Oh, but a lot of these companies got bailout money too, because look, see, McDonald's did well. But there are plenty of restaurants that took tremendous hits last year and are barely functioning, and that was because they got stimulus money and loans and so on and so forth. But now a lot of them have to pay back the loans from last year, didn't get any relief. All that relief stuff, they thought they were getting like free money basically, and a lot of these things, these loans had to be paid back. And there's no second loan coming And once again, things are closing down and people aren't coming to the restaurants and traffic is down. And if they lose money again, they can't survive. And in England, a lot of people are going busted. In the US, I think 15% of our restaurants did shut down in the last 2 years, and probably another 15% are in serious trouble. And if we lose them, we're going to be down 1/3 of our total restaurants. And I'm sure you see it. I'm sure you know places that you like to go to that are no longer in business. People just, are getting pushed out. So I'm not sure where exactly this is going to end or what's going to improve about the situation. And that's just specifically restaurants, but there's a lot of other businesses that are suffering. Movie theaters, as the independent movie theaters, I know a lot of those have closed down, but even the big chains now, if they have another dead season, if they have another dead summer, they're going to have some serious trouble. Here's, here you're going to look at some bad losses. Look at AMC. All right, this is, look, when they have $3 billion in revenues, they make $100 million. It's a really marginal business. Last year, with $1.2 billion in revenues, they lost $4.5 billion. They're expecting to lose, well, they're in the middle, but they're losing another $1.2 billion in 21, and now they're losing, they expect to lose $400 million this year. Where is it going to come from? And how are they going to make it back if in a great year they make $100 million and they lost $5-6 billion in the last couple of years? You're talking about 60 years to make that money back. It's a dead business. All right, and Cinemark is not going to be any better. Boy, remember what Movie Pass? Wow, that was a terrible time to start that business, wasn't it? They fell apart long before COVID, but now Cinemark's not as terrible. Cinemark makes $200 million in a regular year, but they lost $1 billion. It's going to take them 5 years to make that back if everything goes back to normal. And what if it doesn't go back to normal, though? What if instead of losing $400 million this year, they lose $800 million this year? They're not catching up. So, there's a lot of businesses that can get tipped over in trouble, and that's what we're going to be watching very closely as the earnings reports come in. Are people in serious trouble? What are we being told? What is people's outlooks? How seriously are they being affected by COVID? And of course, don't forget, though, the problem is everybody's looking and saying, they want to look and say, oh, things aren't so bad. But you're going on a disease that only the Omicron version only hit us mid-December. It only came along in the last 2 weeks of the last quarter of the year. What's more important is guidance. You got to watch out for the guidance. How are people seeing things shaping up? We're now in the middle, from the middle of December till the middle of January. Is this going to force these guys to start guiding down? How bad do they think this is affecting their quarter? And it's not that anybody knows. Nobody knows for sure. But this is what we have to watch out for and be careful about when we're investing. Holy crap. All right, I've been going on way too long. So that's all our time for now, I guess. And, we're at an in-between time. Like I said, let's just make sure we're being very careful. I went through the long-term portfolios, no positions I'm terribly worried about, but that's because we have an exceptionally large amount of hedges. If we didn't have the hedges, if we didn't have all the cash, I would be massively more concerned. But we have a ton of cash and a lot of hedges, and that's what's going to get us through the first quarter. But believe me, if we break those technicals, where did I put it? If these all turn red, we're going to be adding hedges. That's really what this tells us. We lose these things and they all start turning red. That means this range is broken and we're going to be looking for another major downturn. So we need to hedge up. And what we're looking for now is 15,000. In fact, on the NASDAQ right now, we're below the 15.3 line, aren't we? Yes, see, we fell well below the 15.3 line. So now we've gone red on the NASDAQ. 4557 and 3585. Oops, see, this is it. This is turned black, and this is turned red. So if we finish the day here, it's a significant loss of traction, right? We've got these two things. Red, this would be black here and red here, means we're losing traction. And then if you see more, as you see that, when things start turning red on you, that's when you say, okay, we maybe need to start revisiting our hedges and see if they're okay. But as I pointed out yesterday, we had literally, I mean, since mid-December, this has been the exact same red and black boxes. Red and green boxes that we had in December are the same red and green boxes we have now. So we're just sort of bouncing around inside the range. But if this range starts deteriorating and turning more red, then we've got some serious problems. But either way, I would err on the side of caution and anticipate having those problems going forward, because it's a very tricky time. And oh my God, I mean, it's already January 19th. I mean, it's crazy how fast this year is shooting along now. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it, and we'll do this again next week. All right, take care, everybody.